There was a time period where reform was needed. Europe needed to be restored. And of course, there's a reaction from the rest of the European countries as to what happened. So the next unit is Restoration, Reaction, Reform, 1815 to 1832. Our essential question is, how did Europe react to the Congress of Vienna? The challenges of nationalism and liberalism are going to be real for all people. And nationalism emerged as the most powerful political ideology of the late 19th and early 20th century. What did it mean to be a member of a nation, a group, an ethnic group? Giovanni Mazzini defines it on page 768 of the text. And basically, he says, nationality is everything to the people. How did it spread? It spread via the printed word. Now, we're talking about nationalism here, because people could now read about it with the printing press and the advent of the printed word. They believed the printed word would promote efficiency. It would be more efficient than word of mouth, because now you could hand it out instead of having to tell people physically. Official languages replaced local dialects. So now this is another part of nationalism, is you're going to be speaking German or Dutch or Italian instead of the local dialects. The Congress of Vienna settlement was opposed because not everybody felt it was fair. It was considered to be too conservative. It put everything back into the hands of those who had already ruled before. Old regimes were being looked at as unfair to the masses. But the Congress of Vienna put everything back to the old regimes. Nations are being created now throughout Europe. And the meaning of nationhood was questioned. What does it mean to be a nation? 6 regions in Europe had issues. The political status quo was questioned in these 6 regions. This is on page 767 of your book. Great Britain and Ireland would be one of the places. All the German-speaking people, what used to be the Empire of the Holy Roman Empire. Italian-speaking people. The area between Poland and Russia. And then Eastern Europe was a mess. The Slavs, the Austrian Empire. Southeastern Europe, also a mess. There it was more the Ottomans and Russia, but you had all kinds of different groups that wanted independence. The challenges of liberalism. Liberalism challenges political, social, religious values were all challenged. They asked questions. They made you question why something was done instead of blindly doing it. Many people would say that's progress. Liberalism and nationalism often had different goals, but in many cases they were compatible. So you will find those wanting a national government to be also supporting liberalism. And the word is different today. The word liberal today has got kind of a negative connotation. But all that meant was liberty, look at the root word, and the fact that you're trying to move forward and change. But that's scary to some people. Political goals. Political goals of the movement, so for nationalism and liberalism, were legal equality, so everybody being equal under the law. Religious toleration, we want to allow people to worship as they please, still with limits, however. Freedom of the press. Let us say things in the press. Let us write columns without fear of going to jail. Limits on arbitrary powers of government. In other words, we want the laws written down. We don't want arbitrary things happening where, again, a monarch or somebody in power doesn't like somebody and they put them in jail or they repress them. Economic goals, we're going to look to the Enlightenment and the ideas of Adam Smith. And Adam Smith is going to be the guy that really creates the American economy with his ideas. He didn't have, a hand in it, but we used his ideas. One was free enterprise. You can buy and sell as you choose, make your own businesses as you choose. And then supply and demand will determine prices. A good price usually is found where people will buy it and there's not a shortage, and people will buy it and there's not a huge quantity left over surplus. The programs of the liberals, they're going to vary because of different circumstances in each area. So they are going to vary. Examples: religious freedom in some areas, increased rights for the lower classes, fairness in taxation, increase of land ownership by the lower classes. These are all examples of the liberal program. Now, see, if you look at that, like I said, liberals got a negative connotation today, but if you look at that, can you argue with those things? That's what the liberals wanted. Congress of Vienna. Okay, the Congress of Vienna put things back the way they were before the French Revolution. At least they did their best to. Conservatism is going to dominate after the Congress of 815. After all of that uproar of the French Revolution, people want to go back to having peace and quiet and be conservative, so that makes sense. And this caused conflict with the ideals of the French Revolution, because the French Revolution's founders, they pushed progress, they pushed liberalism. Napoleon gave many people rights that didn't have it before. So we have conflict. And many of the new rights and freedoms were enjoyed by the people during Napoleon's reign, and now some of the old regimes are going to want to take those back. Example, the Protocol of Troppau in 1820. This really was a protocol, meaning a set of ideas that are going to be carried out. This kind of allied the old powers against any kind of new threat. Austrian and German states. Liberalism and nationalism were resisted in those places. Remember, you've got the army ruling. You've got military governments. Military governments and dictators, if you will, Kaisers is what they're going to be called. They don't want change. Frederick William III reneged on his promise to reform in 1817, and this started it. He promised the people, he got them to agree to his government, but then he reneged on that promise. And so student nationalism grew on college campuses. And this is really the first time where you're going to see that the young people are going to rise up because they can. They have free speech, and they are going to protest. But not in Austria and Germany. They're going to be put down mercilessly. The Carlsbad decrees are passed. And make a long story short, you can read about this in the textbook, but a young liberal radical assassinated August von Kotzebue, who was a very conservative playwright, and the guy's name was Carl Sand. And after that, the Carlsbad decrees were announced. Carlsbad, a city in the German states. And student freedom of speech was sharply curtailed. This is, again, outlined on page 775. So they're going to try to take away their chance to meet and write student newspapers and things like that. There are protests throughout Europe. Again, probably very similar to 2020, like this year. Repression in Great Britain was severe. Lord Liverpool's ministry led to popular unrest. Liverpool was the old regime, and popular unrest, people are going to rise up, they're going to meet, they're going to protest. The main problem there was tax laws, and once again, the tax burden falling unfairly upon the lower classes. And it's going to lead to the Peterloo Massacre. This is an awful thing that happens. The Peterloo Massacre occurred at St. Peter's Field, Manchester, England, August 16th, 1819. You've got a big crowd of protesters. Cavalry charged into a crowd of 60 to 80,000, gathering at a meeting to demand the reform of parliamentary representation. I'm surprised the number isn't higher, but 15 were killed, 400 to 700 were wounded. The military, the cavalry riding in on horseback with swords drawn. So yeah, people are going to get hurt. The massacre led to the 6 Acts. So this is England's version of the Carlsbad Decrees. They restricted freedom of speech and assembly. And the Cato Street conspiracy was also unearthed. Okay, now this is very murky and the details are not well known, but apparently one group of these radicals had a plan to blow up Parliament. And this showed that the radicals need to be watched because they did find some evidence. They arrested a few people. And it was an attempt to blow up the House of Commons by a mysterious character by the name of Thistlewood. And they still today don't have a lot of details on this. I think it was, the secretive meeting kind of thing was probably didn't take a lot of notes and write a lot of things down. The 6 Acts forbade large public meetings. They raised the fine for libel. They speeded up trials for political agitators. So instead of the usual time, they would put them on trial very soon. They decreased newspaper circulation, so newspapers are cut. Prohibited the training of armed groups, so militias and that kind of thing. And allowed for the searching of homes without search warrants. So what I would like you guys to do is answer the essential question. And, write your 30 to 50 words there, whatever you want to write or more. And then think about how this is similar to the way things are in keep saying 19, in the way things are in 2020.